Welcome everyone. Super nice to see all of you in here. And welcome to SharePoint Today Warsaw, the online edition. Wow. So it's not Saturday, it's Friday, but it's awesome. And I must tell you, right now it's snowing here in Finland. We hadn't had any snow in like the whole winter, but right now it's snowing. So pretty interesting day here today. Okay, so my session is about Office 365 user adoption, and I'm going to share with you this one customer case we did last year and a year before that, and going through like the steps we did in that case. And just a small reminder, so if you are available on September, please also join us in the live edition of SharePoint Today Warsaw in September the 12th. And thanks for our sponsors and partners and everything. My name is Karoliina, Kettukari. I do Office 365 and Teams user adoption, change management. I'm Microsoft MVP in Office Apps and Services. And I like to speak in conferences. I'm very active in LinkedIn and in Twitter. So please, you can add me as your contacts in there as well. And of course, I have to say that I have this crown in here because actually Edith and Thomas called me a queen of user adoption. So that's why I have the crown nowadays. I like it. It's super cool. But I think that's enough about me. So let's get down to business right away. Okay, so in this case, this is an anonymous case, so we don't have like a public reference, but I can tell you pretty much everything else about it. So I had this one customer. I worked with them over like maybe 2 or 3 years, and I changed company I work with in January, so I don't work with this customer anymore, but I worked with them 2 or 3 years before that. And it's a large Finnish organization, so they have maybe 2,000 employees. And actually, this case, they were like part of this larger corporation. So maybe I would call them a independent unit of this large corporation. And they had some technical configurations already at place, so we didn't have to start technically right away from the beginning. And I think that maybe the easy part for this case for Office 365 and user adoption was that the employees in this organization, they were all white-collar workers with company laptops, company mobile phones. So they were pretty used to working with IT tools. And they had very like document-driven, meeting-driven organizational culture. And basically they run their whole day from a meeting to another. So technical details mostly were in place. So the technical baseline for this Office 365 implementation project was that they had SharePoint 2013 on-premise workspaces. They had maybe 500 workspaces, and then they have also local storage drive, network drives, and so on. They had E5 licenses to everyone, which is super cool. That's awesome to have E5 licenses. And at the beginning of this project, we also migrated most of the workspaces and most of the storage drives to SharePoint Online to the cloud. So I think we migrated like 3 terabytes of data. That's a lot. Okay, so this is the baseline. This is our case organization. And here is what we did. So we had 8 steps in this project. And actually, this is a quite a large case to be told in 50 minutes, because basically each one of these steps you will see here take you to be a session on their own. But the focus in in my session here is like the overview and the overview of activities as a whole and the project phasing. So first, we did some technical work to ensure everything was ready in the cloud environment. We got a project group, and then we ensured we had internal owners who were eager to take on with this project. Then the actual project started with this current state analysis, and we wanted to ensure management engagement and management sponsors with the management workshops. And from those workshops, we gathered a long development list. And based on those developments, we prioritized the list and did some solution pilots. And after the pilots, we gathered best practices, gave technical trainings, we launched a support group, and then we did these best practices and teamwork development workshops to the whole organization. And this even wasn't enough. So then we also moved to process development with Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, and so on. So as you can see, this whole project took about a year to make from start to beginning. And of course, during last year, they went on with the teamwork workshops. They went also on with the technical trainings. So it, of course, didn't stop to the January last year. So in my session today, I will go through with you these 8 steps and tell you about every step, what was important in them, what did we do, how did we succeed, and maybe also what went wrong. Yeah. So phase 1, enabling working in the cloud. So I'm not a technical person. I don't code. I have this SharePoint background. I've done like master pages and stuff like that. But for the last 3 years, I've done only user adoption. So basically Teams user adoption, like the soft stuff. But in order to do successful user adoption, we of course need to have some technical readiness in the organization. So first, we did Exchange migrations. So migrating emails to the cloud environment. And yeah, I have this so small heart around Outlook. That's maybe like the most love I've ever showed to an email. But the very common situation, I think, is that the email migration is not done before implementing Teams. And I don't know why that's really, but I think I've done like more user adoption cases where the Exchange migration is not done when we are already taking Teams into use. And if you can, of course, you can use Teams without the emails in the cloud, but then you miss, for example, you don't have your calendar in Teams, you can't use To Do, and so on. So small things, but I think user adoption wise, those matter a lot. So in this case, in this project, we did the Exchange migration beforehand, and I actually think it was one of the success factors in here as well. Okay, so then document migration. So actually, this whole document migration, this is also like a huge project on its own, and I could talk about this for an hour, but I'm actually not that interested in document migrations. But some things you could think about, because you have tons of options. Like you can start with a totally blank canvas, or then you can basically copy paste everything, like copy paste the whole mess as it is, like lift and shift migration. But at least I think you should plan the information architecture, like plan the Teams channels, plan the folders, metadata, if you need any approval paths or whatever. In this case, we did pretty simple migration. So we migrated the active SharePoint workspaces to Teams, into the SharePoint Online behind the teams. And the workspace owners, we gave them a chance to clean up the folders before the migration, but actually I don't think many of them did anything. So basically we lift and shifted pretty much the whole thing, and it's not the best way to do, but we did it in here. So if they had that folder, subfolder, subfolder, subfolder hell before, they still do in Teams. It's not easy. And other thing you could think about with document migration is that maybe you think that you could say goodbye to the old local storages, but there's always something, some material that maybe should be archived somewhere, or maybe you aren't allowed to move the material to the cloud, so it's super top secret. So in this case, actually, the old storages, they were set to read only, and now the storage drives, they're like a super expensive archiving cabinet. Maybe not the best solution, but this is how we did in here. And third technical thing, actually a month ago, in the beginning of March, there was Tech Days Finland in Helsinki. Back then, when we could have on live conferences. Oh, I miss live conferences. And me and Vesa Napanen, we had a presentation there about Teams governance and lifecycle management. And that's super important. That also something maybe not interesting me that much, but super important. So you really should consider Teams lifecycle governance model and that stuff, like naming guidelines, owner requirements, maybe inactive team archiving rules. And I say Tiago asked a question in the chat. I will maybe read and answer the questions after this presentation. Okay, so the third thing you really should consider is having some kind of governance model, some kind of lifecycle management model. And pro tip I have in here, go to Teams only as soon as possible. I see many organizations that have both Skype and Teams in use at the same time. And of course, you still have the year, so you can use Teams and Skype for Business online together. But for end user, it's very confusing to have both Skype and Teams at use all the time. So in this customer case, please in this customer case, they still have both Teams and Skype, and it's not the best way to go. So this was our first phase. This was the basic technical requirements we did to be able to move on to the user adoption part. And of course, these aren't everything. You can also think about licensing, Intune, MFAs. MFAs, super important. Information security and everything. So the list goes on. This is not like the complete technical list. Awesome. So phase 1. Then phase 2. So we are getting nearer to the user adoption part. Finding internal owners. And I think this is something I feel like this is mostly like the quest for the Holy Grail. But like in Monty Python, my tip is that don't give up, because you may think that the customer project manager is also an owner, like they own Teams or they own modern workplace. But sadly, in many cases, that's not true. It would be super perfect. And actually in this project, our project manager from the customer side, she took responsibility of the whole user adoption process. She took responsibility of teamwork development, communications, and Teams as a product. So that was a perfect match. And actually, you might think that, oh, is this really that important? But sadly, we got also to test this theory in real life, because after this project, so after these 8 steps, our project manager, she changed jobs. So she went to work for another company, and then the internal owner vanished. And after that, this company, they didn't have any owner for Teams, no owner for modern ways of working. And it was very hard to plan any user adoption activities after that. So right in the beginning of your project, please find internal owners who are eager to take the modern workplace, who are eager to take Teams further on in the organization. Okay, phase 3. So current state analysis. I think this is a little thing, but it's also neglected thing. So this is easy to organize. It gives you like tons of information you can't get from anywhere else. You can't get it from like project charts or talking with the project team. And I think for me it's super important to get familiar with the business processes in organization, and to get familiar with the everyday work life the employees in the organization experience every day. And we all maybe know that the process charts and the organizational charts, they can give us some information, but in reality they also are pretty different from the day-to-day life in your organization. To get that view on the organization, I personally like to do like these one-on-one interviews with some of the employees, and I like to talk with normal employees. So not with the managers, not with the supervisors, just normal employees, line workers, experts, and maybe do 5 to 10 half-an-hour interviews, hour-long interviews, and that's usually enough. And of course, I like to be live with my clients. I like to see them live if that's possible. But of course, especially nowadays, we can use Teams. We can utilize remote meetings too. If you have a very large project, if you have a very formal organization, you can also use these like formal questionnaires, formal tools like Microsoft has this readiness assessment. You can also use ProSci questionnaires, but I'd like to maybe use those alongside with the live interviews. And of course, if you have field workers, if you have first line workers, then one good thing to do with them is shadowing. So you go and sit with the customer service, or you go to the shop and then shadow the salesperson in the shop and see what kind of tools they use, how do they communicate. And the analysis can vary on your user adoption goals. Usually I do tend to talk about how they're communicating internally, how information flows within teams, within projects, what kind of tools do they use? For example, do they have email, WhatsApp, SharePoint, whatever. And then we are getting to the reality of things instead of how they should be. And Mark actually said in the chat a very good point. IT is not also the best thing to talk with. Just go with the normal employees. That's where the real information lies. Okay, and I have 2 pro tips for this one. The first one, do not skip this, really, because it's such a small thing. It takes maybe a day or maybe 2 days if you write lots of things down. But if you don't do this, without this current state analysis, you don't have a clue about the organization's real challenges. And I think you are not able to do like this solid user adoption plan to the company. Many times, also I don't know, but for some reason, the project team, like the customer wants to do this themselves because maybe they want to save money. Maybe they are just super curious to interview the employees. But I think the customer project team, they are too deep in their own processes to gather any objective information. And second of all, I think an employee is more likely to be open and honest with an external consultant than some project manager. Okay, so we did some interviews. We had some baseline about the organization's biggest challenges and maybe also the biggest, like what kind of tools they were using. So we moved on to the next phase of our user adoption project. And it's all about management. This is also something I could have a whole hour session just about the engaging the management. So how to get the C-level like CEO, CIO, CTO, whatever, eager and excited about teams, eager and excited about user adoption. So we had workshops for executive committee, for business unit managers, for secretaries, and really secretaries, don't forget the secretaries because they are your secret asset in the organization. They know everything what's going on in the management group, and it's super important to get secretaries on board right in the beginning. We did these workshops. We wanted to inspire and engage the management to teams, to other Office 365 tools, and to get them to support our adoption project. And actually, in the end, we didn't have just one management sponsor, but we did have like the whole executive committee team to sponsor this user adoption. And it was awesome. It was really successful in here. Each workshop in here. So we had 13 workshops, and each workshop was 2.5 hours long. And when I have told about this, this is easy in Finland. It's very easy in Finland to get CEOs into Teams workshops. And yes, Ivan, is also very easy to get them excited about Teams. Because actually one thing they were super excited about always was the GIFs. So if you show them GIFs in Teams conversation, then they were like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Okay. But these workshops, they were 3 parts. So first, we had the overview. So what's going to change when we are moving to the cloud? If they have used like 10 paper network drives for 10 years, 20 years, working in the cloud, like the basic co-authoring or like having your Teams in your mobile phone, that's super different ways to work. So like the basics of working in the cloud. In the second part, we focused on some Office 365 applications and thought about their challenges. What kind of challenges they have at the moment, for example, in the internal communication, and how can we solve those challenges, for example, with Teams, with OneNote, with Planner, and so on. Usually, we were in the pretty basics, like we talked about Teams chat, Teams meetings, maybe OneNote. But with some groups, we also got a little bit deeper to Power Platform, to Power Apps, and stuff like that. And then in the third phase of the management workshop, we gathered like this long list. It was in Excel. Of course, you could do like Power Apps or something fancy, but we had Excel. And actually, we gathered the primary challenges the manager had at their work, and then we created this development list based on the possible solutions. So for example, if they had problems with information flow within team, hey, we could use Teams in there. Or if they had like this project Kanban, maybe we could use Planner instead of that, and so on. So we had some pretty concrete, pretty interesting cases right away. And we did the list and we prioritized the needs list. And after the 13 workshops, we had over 100 rows of development ideas we had to prioritize in order to continue with this project. So out of those 100 ideas, we ended up with 6. So we had 6 modern work pilots based on these 13 management workshops. Okay. So we had 6 pilot groups, and actually the executive committee team was one of our pilot groups. Also, someone in the chat said that secretaries also should be like a network, or they could also be a pilot group because they are such an important group, and it's a very good idea. In this case, so we had the management group, and then we had 5 other projects, agile teams, and also one bigger supervisor group as a pilot team. And you can, I could say that maybe you should take teams that are eager and that already have the need to communicate with each other. For example, in Finnish organizations, for example, if you have an HR team, you usually sit down together in the same room, and then basically you can just shout to each other when you have something to say. So maybe some cross-organizational team or some kind of teams that sit in different places, sit in different offices, maybe sit in different countries, that's a good pilot because they have to utilize some kind of digital tool to collaborate and to communicate. So for each pilot team, we gave some workshops, we had some trainings. So of course, first of all, you need to find owners for the pilot team. So the owner, they don't have to be the supervisor. They don't have to be like the manager of the team, but the owner can be someone who is eager to take this forward, who is maybe eager also to maybe help the others in the long run. And I would also suggest having more than one owner per team. So maybe 2 to 3 owners is a good amount of owners in one pilot team. So we had a chat with the owners. We defined what the team needs. We defined the goals for the pilot, what we want to achieve, and then we gave the owners a bit of a training also beforehand. Then we did team workshops. So maybe 1, 2, or 3 workshops per pilot, depending what they really needed. Usually in this case, we had 3. So the first one was Teams basics, team working in Teams, like Teams meetings, Teams chat, Teams channels. And the second one, it was about better meetings. So OneNote, maybe Planner, and so on. And the third workshop was redefining the team rules and maybe Planner forms, like going a bit into the deeper into Office 365. And after the workshops, we had some check with the owners. So how's it going? Do you have any difficulties? Have you any questions? And in the end of these pilots, we gathered feedback with forms, and then we gathered like the best practices we have learned from each of the pilots. And this was basically our way to gather the best practices for different kind of teams, for example, management group, project team, and so on. So now it had gone maybe 4 months into this project, and we had the technical baseline ready. We had done some pilots. We gathered best practices, but before we could really share all the best practices to the whole organization, we needed everyone to be also on the same level technically. Because in every organization, the IT skill level vary very much. So some of you are very low in IT skills, and then some of you are already building like Power Apps and everything, when the others are just waiting to learn how to use the Teams chat. So one thing I hear a lot, but I think it's pretty interesting, is that sometimes I hear the IT team say that these tools should be so easy, they don't need any training. But I think also technical trainings shouldn't be like we go through every single button in Teams. For example, if you have a Word training, you want to train Word into your team, you don't open the Word ribbon and then go through every single button they have in the ribbon. You tell the best practices in Word. So the technical trainings in this project, they were also more like these best practices, tips and tricks, like how to get that fancy title to your message, how to add a pretty document link, and so on. In this project, we did webinars, but we also offered face-to-face trainings. I think webinars, they are a super easy way. It's a resource efficient way to train, especially large groups. But not everyone likes webinars. Of course, during these days, we don't have any choices because we have to be remote. But if you have the possibility, it's always a good idea to try to offer live trainings also for those who prefer live trainings. Then we had this talk about instructions. So in every project, they also always want, please can you do all these technical instructions? And I always try to say, no, I'm not doing any technical instructions. Because first of all, Microsoft, they have like tons and tons of free instructions. Also, working in the cloud, it means that the Teams, Office 365, it changes all the time. So if you use like 2 days in creating one instruction, it can be totally outdated in 4 weeks. And that's not a good usage of your time. So whenever you can, please use the online resources. If you, of course, most of them are in English, but at least in Finland, we can use those pretty okay. We did some kind of instructions, but actually we did these like role-based instructions. So if I am a manager, what should I do in Teams? Or if I am a salesperson, how is my day going with all of these new tools? The picture you see in here, this is this day in the life of package Microsoft has done. For example, day in the life of HR person. And actually they updated this, I think 2 weeks ago, because they now have also day in the life of remote worker, which is awesome. But these kind of like role-based instructions are more efficient than pure technical instructions. And then maybe my favorite thing, my favorite and most easy user adoption tip ever, do a support group. So open support group for everyone. If you have a large organization, you have to use Yammer because Teams doesn't support more than 5,000 at the moment, soon 10,000 employees in one group. But Yammer, you can add much more at the moment. If you have a small organization, you can do the support group in Teams also. So just open group where people can ask questions, answer to each other, and so on. It's super easy. And after a while, the best thing is that the people start answering to themselves. So it takes lots of pressure and lots of time away from the project group. One also pro tip that isn't here is that with Teams, we usually want to decrease the amount of emails. But if we are just starting to use Teams, email is the place what reaches people at the first place. So if you have email lists, you can use the email list to advertise Teams trainings, Teams instructions, whatever you have. And then you can print out posters. For example, Microsoft has lots of these super fancy, nice visual posters you can print and tape beside your coffee machine or lunch area when we are once again allowed to go to the office. But then they are somewhere people notice them every day. And then they're a constant reminder that, hey, what's this Teams? Maybe I shall go and take a look at it. So don't underestimate the power of printed posters in this case. Actually, in this customer, we printed posters and took them to the elevators. Okay, so now we have trained everyone. They are technically in the technically in the same baseline, and we have an active support group going on. One thing actually I didn't said in the beginning, but you might notice that we don't have any champions network in here. And the company, they didn't want champions network in this project, but I think having a champion network is super important. As I said from the support group takes lots of pressure and lots of time away from the project team, and so does the champion network. So even if we didn't do champion network in this project, I would really recommend having a champion network in your user adoption cases. Okay, so phase number 7. And actually, this is the user adoption phase. So everything else was just preparing to get to this phase. And this is where we start actually developing teamwork. We start developing our meeting culture. We start to work together more efficiently. We start to work together better in teams. And we did these teamwork workshops where we had gathered the best practices from pilots, best practices from support groups, and we created this teamwork development workshop model. And then we took first the teams who were the most eager. So of course, in an organization, you have like hundreds of different projects, hundreds of different teams, and take first those ones who are the most eager, like first come, first served. So and don't use time, don't waste time on reluctant teams because they will come later on. So I think one of the things why we succeeded so good in this project was that actually the customer in here facilitated most of these workshops by themselves. So at this point, the project had already been ongoing for half a year, maybe 7 months. And actually the customer project team, they were like ready consultants already because they had been on with us in so many trainings, in so many workshops. And the customer always knows what's going on in the company and how the everyday routines are in the company. So in this case, I made sure the customer was empowered to survive on their own because, of course, we were getting near to the end of our project. And I wanted to make sure that after we had left the building, the customer could survive on their own and continue this user adoption journey with these workshops. And actually, about this workshop method, I have another session in I think it's in comms first. I hope comms first will be live, but let's see what happens to that. But I will certainly talk more about this in some other conference, because I think this is super important. Maybe not that easy, but a super important part of the user adoption. Okay, then we are in the last phase of our project. So they were like slowly getting grasp of basics of teams, teamwork in teams. So for our project team, it was time to shift our focus from the basic user adoption to process development. And I think this is pretty much where the real money, like the real business value lies. Because with user adoption, you can get, of course, better employee experience. You can get happier employees. But if you are talking about money and saving time, this is also super important. So if you remember, we had already gathered quite a many Power Platform use cases, Power Apps cases from the management workshops we did in the beginning of this project. So we had like this low-hanging fruit, like this apple in here. And then we took those cases and got into work. So maybe my pro tip in here is that if you want to have like Power Up cases, then you can also have like this Power Platform case workshop where you can tell about what you can do with Power Platform, what kind of Power Apps can you do. And then there's always someone who is eager, and always someone who realizes that, oh, I have this Excel, or I have this SharePoint list. Can I do something fancy with it? So can I do some automation with, for example, build some flow with Power Automate instead of my Excel? And also another pro tip in here, as well as we talked about the team's governance model and the team's lifecycle management model, I think it's also super important to talk about like Power Platform governance model. For me, maybe not my thing, but in this case, it was also something we did in the year of this project. So 8 phases, very fastly gone through, and after all of this we did in 9 months, in pretty much less than a year. So in the end result was that they had Teams active users in 86%. And this was the number from October last year. And as I said, I'm not working for this company anymore, so I don't know the numbers right now, but I hope that they have been able to keep this number up in a good level, of course, because also of this remote working situation. And one super nice thing, as you maybe remember, this organization, they were not Teams only for some reason. So they had both Skype and Teams in active use. And now this is something I'm actually pretty proud of. So the people in the organization, they have a free will if they want to use Skype or if they want to use Teams. So about a year ago, the Teams usage got past the active usage in chat. As the Teams active users got past the active users in Skype. So this is super nice to see that even given the free will, the people will realize that Teams has its value over Skype. Awesome. So a short aftermath. All in all, it's always nice to talk about this project because this is a huge success. So this was really a great project. It went super fine. And why it went so smoothly? I think it was because of these 4 things. So first of all, we were technically ready. So we had the email migration done, we had document migrations done, everything and so on. And second of all, we had this strong internal commitment and ownership, both from the project group and also from the management team. We had these management workshops, so we got lots of these real life use cases, real life best practices we could utilize. And of course, one thing I always say that the teams is not about tools, it's about the cultural change in the organization. So in this case, we always manage to keep the key messages about change and about culture and not about the tools. Okay, there were some things that weren't perfect, of course. So as I told you before, our biggest letdown in this project was when the manager, the project manager, she went to work for another company after this project ended. So the internal owner vanished. And that meant that the company, they didn't have any owner for teams, owner for modern teamwork. And that's why also we didn't get any like feedback questionnaires. We didn't have any user roadmap for this year and so on. But as you can see from the numbers, I hope they are fine. I think they are fine. So 86% active Teams users is a great number, and I hope it's gone even above that at the moment. Awesome. That's my super quick overview of this one user adoption project. Thank you very much. Please remember to give your feedback. And I'll try to see if you have any questions here in the chat. There was so much conversation here. Maybe I missed some question, but it's so much things in the chat. It's hard to see. If you have some questions, you can write them in the chat. And I hope you'll have an awesome day. There are still a few sessions coming later on this afternoon, so enjoy those and then have a wonderful weekend. Diego asked, would you recommend to migrate a department files here to a team department? I wouldn't maybe recommend migrating anything but really the active files that are in active use. So nothing, and then you maybe should have some archive where you can archive all the things you maybe need later on, but that are not in active use. I'm very opposite to any lift and shift migrations, even though we did it in here, but anyway. Mark asked what kind of training materials are more effective. I think training materials, short videos, and by short videos I mean 30 seconds to 3 minutes. Those are super effective because they are such short videos. The users always have time to take a look at those. Then I think for technical trainings, you can have like this maybe 30-minute, 45-minute webinars. But then I always have the question that can we record this webinar? So of course you can record like a hour-long Teams technical training, but I don't know if any of your users will really watch the technical training for 1 hour. So I really like the idea of really short videos. And I also like the idea of online SharePoint. Please, Thomas, can we have online SharePoint?
Right. I mean, sure, we can have an online SharePoint. We just can't deliver beers and alcohol. Plus, right now, we can have an online dinner if anyone wants to join whichever session team. However, right now we have this break for dinner, so if you are hungry, then just go to your kitchens and eat something, and then we'll be back at 1 p.m. with the new sessions. Oh, Karoliina, you just moved away to...
Yeah, you are so fast, Karoliina, with adoption, I would say.
That is impossible travel, you know. You should be now locked out.
I just turned my camera on, and this is the first time I see it is. Oh my God!
I have my cat here.
Yeah, Thomas has different outfits for today's SharePoint Saturday or so.
Oh.
Can't get rid of it.
All right, guys. So it looks that we are going to have a break for lunch, for beer, for whatever you want. The good fact is that we will have different dishes for everyone, right? Yeah, so we see each other at 1 p.m. for next upcoming sessions regarding the schedule. Thank you very much, Karoliina.
Thank you. Bye-bye.